Life Over Coffee. Conversations for transformation.
Hello, everyone. This is Rick Thomas with Life Over Coffee. Thank you so much for joining me. Today, I have Daniel Berger. He's a regular contributor to our ministry. I've interviewed him many times. He's participated in our Leaders Over Coffee monthly meeting a few times as well. Our community loves him very much. His writings. I've known Daniel for several years now and used to live here in Greenville, South Carolina. He has since moved to New York and has been pastoring for the last few years. Many of you know him as a prolific writer, easy for me to say. He's written several books. And last year, I did an interview with Daniel on his latest book at that time. And honestly, I haven't even asked him if there's been one since then. Usually there is one since then. But it was The Schizophrenic Unicorn. And it is a tremendous book, definitely a gift to God's church. I interviewed him about this book, and we even did a Leader Over Coffee monthly meeting about it. It was a huge help for our supporting community. And so what I thought I would do to be a blessing to you all is ask Daniel if he wanted to do a Zoom call to where we could a year later, as far as the book is concerned, because I haven't been following the ins and out of it as he would, and so he's teaching these things globally, actually, and so he's had a lot of interaction. And one of the things that I've wanted to know is how has God used this book in people's lives, and I don't know the answer to that question, and so we're going to find out together. Daniel, thank you. Here we go again. Thanks for being here.
Always a privilege, Rick. Thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, so the book is a year and some months old. Is that right?
Yep, that's
Yep.
right.
Yep.
February last year. So yeah, 14 and a half months.
Yeah, and this is May, as far as the timestamp is concerned, this is May of 2025.
Yeah.
And so it's been out going on a year and a half. Daniel, if you would, just give us a brief overview. I want a couple of questions. Why did you write this book? And of course, then what is the book about? And then we'll get into what has happened over the past almost year and a half.
Yeah, the a
Why,
lot of
why,
people.
why, why did you write it? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, a lot of people don't know that even though I cite and disagree with a lot of what psychiatry, their worldview certainly. Their doctrines, such as materialism and biodeterminism and biodegenerationism. I disagree with them, but at the same time, I've just learned that a lot of these guys have a real heart to help people. And when you're unsaved and then you're stuck in this Kreplinian view, and you want to help people, you're desperate for answers. So it's been really exciting for me to see the open doors. And it's interesting. There's more and more psychiatrists. I think of Dr. Joseph on he was a FDA psychiatrist, and he's got a YouTube channel now. He resigned from a six-figure job, 800, 900,000 a year, testing psychiatric drugs, and said, I can't do this anymore. We're hurting people. And I'm not anti-drug. I want people to know facts before they choose that. And there's a lot of deceit, and he's actually saying that as well. So there's more and more psychiatrists, and what they have pointed out is there's an academic side, the kind of people who control the system, and then there's people in the trenches. And I've just learned that there's really sharp people. And so why I wrote this is numerous. One is the system has incredibly failed. Now, those of you hearing, sadly, people, jump immediately. Well, my brother, my sister, my child was diagnosed with schizophrenia. How dare you attack? I'm not attacking anyone at all. I'm saying your struggles are real. The psychosis is a real thing, and I think that's really important. But how we interpret that leads to how we address it. So I was burdened that we understand this from a genuinely scientific point rather than reifying it. We can go into all these terms and things, certainly as we go through this. Seculars use these terms, incidentally, rather than just creating these heuristic constructs, these ideas and saying that's what we're going to chase. That's what we're going to blame for psychosis, and clearly people aren't being helped. And so I was really motivated on that end, but then also my own curiosity. I mean, I'm not one when I know the Bible speaks on things and science does to not investigate. There's got to be an answer in either God's organic knowledge that He's created with His mouth, or in His Word. And so I sought to investigate that.
Yeah, I do want to put an anchor at one of the points that you made, because when people hear it's not real, or however that's communicated, and I'm sure we can do better in the communication of it on our end, but what people hear inevitably is that my problem's not real, and it's almost like you're minimizing a very real experience that I'm going through, or you're saying that that experience is just false
Right.
altogether, and we're not saying that at all. And so
Correct.
what's being said is the problem is real, and so we'll drive an anchor down
Yeah.
there. But there's a couple of directions that we can go as far as solution is concerned. And so
Right.
what you're saying, you're going through something real. This is not a solution if you go down this path. And as you quote this gentleman, many people, by the way, are coming to that understanding
Right.
that the DSM is not the best path for us to go down. And you are suggesting a bibliocentric path. One of the interesting things that has happened in the last year since writing of the book is the election of November 2024,
Yeah.
specifically with Bobby Kennedy Jr. coming on board, uh, because he has a different approach and a different worldview than just going straight down the medical route. Now, he would believe, as you believe, that we're not against medication at all,
100%. Yeah.
but is that the total solution? And so he's bringing, I think, appropriate skepticism. And so we're not
Yeah.
throwing the baby out with the bathwater, but can we can we think through these things? Can we
Right.
run them back through the hermeneutical spiral, and maybe come to better conclusions? And so again, the anchor point is you're going through something that's very real, but there is a better, well, there is a solution where the medication route, or what the DSM offers and the culture is not really
Yeah.
a good pathway to go down. And so let's talk about, you've got a very cryptic title, and maybe some people, this will be the first time that they will hear about the schizophrenic unicorn. And so I don't want to assume that everybody is familiar with the book. And so what does that title mean?
Yeah. And interestingly enough, I was inspired by a psychiatrist named Nasir Gami. And Gami was the head of translational medicine at Novartis. He teaches at Tufts and Harvard medical schools in psychiatry, very prominent psychiatrist. And I actually just last night watched a video he posted, 33-minute video. It's incredibly fascinating. Now, I don't agree with everything. He rightfully, I do agree that autism is a biological problem that really shouldn't be in the DSM, but he leaves out things like Alzheimer's in that list, and he adds other things that like alcoholism. I'm not saying there's not a toxicity that affects the body in that, and he includes other constructs. But Nasir Gami actually in that video reiterates this point. He says, "Listen, unicorns are defined in the dictionary, but just because we have a universal definition of something doesn't mean it exists in nature." And so a in material idea, when you insist that it exists organically, like you'll hear it's genetic, it's biological, it's caused in the gut, it's all these different theories, which incidentally they don't agree on. That's a whole nother. Seculars don't agree on their own theories, which is interesting in itself. It's a misconception that they even know this is all speculation. So they have created I've used this word, previous, but the word heuristic is the idea of, let me just throw out an idea and chase it until we have a better idea. So Freudianism was a heuristic concept. When you start studying this, you'll see they use that exact word. And then when Kraepelinianism came along, who invented schizophrenia and bipolar, alcoholism, all these these horrific constructs that were used in Nazi Germany, they replaced Freudianism with Kraepelinianism, and they're trying to now. GAMI is actually advocating that we throw away the DSM completely, which is a really interesting. In this video I just watched, he just published it. He says it's because we're actually not doing science. So his point to that is, just because we can talk about something, and if I can use a Catholic doctrine of transubstantiation, maybe this will help people. Maybe nobody knows what transubstantiation is, but the Catholic Church, and I kind of looked into this. Only about 30% of practicing Catholics believe in transubstantiation. But the idea is, if I take communion, so if I eat the bread and I drink the wine, then what God says, for example, in John chapter 6, that you shall eat my flesh and drink my blood, that bread and water transubstantiate, they turn into the actual body of Christ. Now there's consubstantiation too, that somehow God magically comes inside you, physically when you take it. And that's another doctrine. I'm just simply pointing out that's exactly what happens within psychiatry. When I go say that I'm in a psychotic state or I'm struggling with catatonia, I'm giving a phenomena that is real, but nobody can, only the person experiencing that. It's actually phenomenological. I can't go to the body and find psychosis in the body. I can find where the brain is affected. That's a different thing. But I can't prove that psychosis, something inorganic that the person is experiencing, is something biological. It is real, but it's inorganic. So when I transubstantiate it, I'm turning it in magically into a physical substance without any evidence. And that's why GAMI is saying, hey, stop calling this the medical model. It's actually an unmedical model. We're not doing science. And I'll share that link with you. You can share it on this podcast. But it's a fascinating. They understand this, so they're just looking for the next best thing. And even going back to your question, why did I write this? A lot of people don't realize. A lot of Christians don't realize we accept science as the natural world has realities. It's facts. There's organic things that we can go look at. The spiritual things are metaphysical. They're inorganic. And seculars deny that dualism, but they also look at the natural world as, so science to them is something they invent and develop. So when they are creating heuristic constructs or ideas, they're wanting to evolve that into existing in reality. They really think they can speak things into existence. And that shocks a lot of people until they start actually studying what a secular's view of science is versus Scripture. God spoke everything into existence. It's already there. The facts are there. The truths are there. We have to go to discover that. And the scientific method essentially says, okay, I'm going to put a heuristic idea. I'm going to put a hypothesis up, but I'm not going to accept that until there's evidence to prove it. Well, psychiatry says we don't need evidence. We're going to accept it as true, and anything that comes along, we're going to fit in as evidence, even if it doesn't quite fit, if that makes sense. So long answer, but it's a topic that deserves a lot more attention because people aren't familiar with these concepts.
So the experience is real. They label it schizophrenia, but there's no such thing as schizophrenia. It's a
failure to explain, right? It's actually ironically
no such thing as a unicorn. What is schizophrenia, or what they call schizophrenia?
Yeah, it's a simplistic answer when they don't know how to explain why a person's in a psychotic state. So if they know that a person's having heart issues, if they know a person has neuroencephalitis, if they know a person just had a baby, they'll call that postpartum psychosis. If they know the cause of psychosis, then they won't typically call it schizophrenia. I'm actually getting ready to publish a new book on a shorter book on schizophrenia. I was asked by several physicians to do this and thought it was a really good idea because, they're busy and they really appreciate this. And it's been helpful to them. But it's all new citations too, which is exciting for me. But this whole idea of, saying that schizophrenia is a cause of psychosis, but then we don't know the cause of schizophrenia, is just adding a whole nother complexity and confusion. And they start chasing that instead of real, either biological things. And I'll give you two case in points here. These are real people I'm counseling right now. Two different people diagnosed, one with schizoaffective disorder and the other with schizophrenia. They call it schizophrenia spectrum now. But both of these have a valid, what's called neurometabolic disease. So there was a misdiagnosis. They've had all these gut issues. I actually read one psychiatric article on this where the psychiatrist saying that we know of 6 metabolic diseases, and some of them are genetically caused, like the MTHFR polymorphism. There's different types of this, so not everybody goes into psychosis that has it. And two of the young men I'm counseling, one with labeled with in the secular construct is bipolar, the other is schizoaffective. Both have this mutation. And this is a valid biological thing. It's not schizophrenia, it's a neurometabolic disease. And so psychosis presents itself even 2 years before the gut problems occur. And it's an incredibly fascinating study. So that's just one example of when we start looking at real problems instead of these created constructs, Kreplinian eugenic constructs. We are starting to find real solutions. And it's been really exciting and encouraging for me and a lot of people, their lives just radically changed.
So when they say schizophrenia, they're basically saying we don't know what it is, but
Correct.
you're saying if we remove the label and just set the label over here, and then let's look in and see exactly what's going on.
That's
you
right.
can find many different issues, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
Yep. And the link to all these different issues, whether it's heart disease, whether it's Huntington's disease, whether it's autism, there's just countless things, is severe sleep problems. And I want to make this clear to the listener. I'm not saying sleep problems are the cause. That would be a simplistic answer. And sadly, people they don't read what I write. They don't listen to what I say. And so they make these assumptions, or I've heard all this before. No, they haven't, but they make these assumptions. And in the title, it says the centrality of sleep because it's a central issue. The average person between 2 and 3 days will go into a psychotic break when they're not sleeping. But we have to find out, and this is where it gets difficult. This isn't a simplistic theory I'm throwing out. This is difficult. And the one young man I'm counseling right now, we still have not gotten to why he's struggling. And we're actually working with his psychiatrist. And let me also say another deceitful thing I've heard people say. I make it very clear in my book that what are called antipsychotics, the number one effect is somnolence. It puts people to sleep. So there's an incredible value, at least initially. Long term, they do a lot of damage. And I speak the truth in love. People can decide whether they want to stay on or not. But I guess I'm bipolar because half of me laughs and the other half just grieves that people try to set up a scarecrow and say, oh, Daniel teaches this. I don't. Read my book and then we can talk, kind of thing. But, it's people that usually, and I don't mean this in a mean way, but they're very knowledgeable of their own experience with a loved one, but they're ignorant of what's actually being said and done. And again, I'm not saying that in an air or a mean way at all. I'm saying I want to help these people. That's why I write. But it's usually not the doctors that are attacking. It's people that aren't well equipped to understand. So it's understandable, and I try to be gracious.
It's a faith issue, and what I mean by that is that we can be loyal to a label,
Yeah.
or it's like, it's not so much about the label, but can we find out what's going on? However, when you're going through something and somebody does give it a label, it does give the person hope. It might not be the right answer that they're looking for, but at least I can hang my hat on something oh, it's schizophrenia. And then you come along and say, well, schizophrenia is not real. Well, then they're free falling there. And so it's a faith issue. Well, then I don't know
Right.
what to trust. This label gave me a reasonable amount of faith or trust. And so I believe in this, but now we're moving that away. And I know in counseling, that has been a recurring problem because when
Right.
people come in with a label, it becomes an identity, it becomes their hope. And then when you start deconstructing that because you want to give them a better way, it's hard for them to let go of that and to grab hold of that. I always use the illustration of a trapeze artist. I know what I'm holding to, or I think I know what I'm
Right.
holding to over here, but you're asking
Right.
me to let go of this and to grab this. And there's a moment in time where you're not holding on to anything and you just feel like you're free falling. But that's where we want to help them. Again, you're going through something real, but we want you to
Right.
grab over here because this is where true help is.
Yeah. And if I can add to exactly what you're saying, I've kind of seen, I mean, there's more than this, but there's two general types that resist this. There's the one that, just understandably doesn't get it. They're not quite understanding. I've accepted this, as explaining me, and you're saying this isn't a real thing. Like I'm not understanding. And then the other side is people take this on as an identity. They think that when you're removing a construct that somehow you're denying their experience, and we're not at all. And you've made that very clear. But it's understandable because again, this is I'm using big fancy words, but they use these. The new book I'm writing is trying to really explain and teach the philosophy of psychiatry, and people don't even realize that they have massive amounts of material on just the philosophy because they realize it is philosophical, and that's why these big words just keep being thrown out because it's all a theory. It's a heuristic idea that humanists have developed because they don't have the wisdom of God. And it's I will say though that more and more secularists, like you start studying this psychiatrist at Harvard, Chris Palmer, he just posted a couple days ago on Twitter that it basically said if we took everyone who's diagnosed with severe mental illness, schizophrenia, et cetera, and we removed and I'm not quoting him verbatim here, but this is the general idea, and we actually found out what was wrong with him, we would have no more mental illness. That's the gist of what he said. And they're finding around 30 to 40% of people actually have gut problems that have been labeled, just like I'm saying. And that's just one example. I'm not saying that all people labeled, as schizophrenic have gut problems. That's not what I said. So it is beginning to be realized in the secular realm, and it's exciting. I'm getting to interact with more psychiatrists, and incidentally, the people who endorse this book, one lady has fully recovered from schizophrenia label, and she doesn't just endorse it; she's an advocate now, helping others through it. It's pretty exciting. Another physician that endorsed it, his son was diagnosed with schizophrenia, actually in your area there, and he's been very vocal about this, that it has failed, the system has failed. He's a very high esteemed physician, and on it goes. Psychiatrists have endorsed my book. This isn't just a nice, fun little theory. It is helping people, and I just encourage if people don't like what I'm saying, do your thing. And when you still don't find answers, and I don't mean that again, I do hope that things are resolved for you, but I want to help people. I want to help people. I'm seeing the fruit. Our church is seeing the fruit. Our area is seeing the fruit, and it motivates me. Unfortunately, as Gammy said in his interview, as Emerson said, if you try to change society for the positive, they will attack you. And sometimes I feel like, and you know this, Rick, well, maybe no one's ever attacked you, but people don't like truth sometimes. Don't confuse me with facts, kind of thing. And so we have to really evaluate when those things happen. Why are we doing this? Is it for God's glory and to help people to love God and love others, or is there another thing going on? And quite frankly, it hurts because the fear of man is there. We struggle
Right.
with that, but
Yeah, we can be
Yeah.
we can be reactive. One of the labels are efficient. They're very handy. I got PTSD, I got OCD, I got uh, ADHD, I got schizophrenia or whatever. And so I train people in biblical counseling. That's what I do all day long. And inevitably, one of these students will say, "Well, what does the Bible call it?" I said, "Well, the Bible doesn't call it a label. The Bible is actually more sophisticated than that." And so they have the advantage of putting everything in one bucket and then putting a label over it. That is neat and it's nicely packaged and it's handy. And you can just say, "Oh, I have OCD." Well, what
Yeah.
is that according to the Bible? What label?
Right.
Well, there's probably 7 or 8 different things going on. And so we are not that neat. We can't package our problems that way because the Bible is way more
Right.
sophisticated. It gets into the trenches, it gets into the tentacles, and it brings all of these things together. So if you want to help them comprehensively, we've got to open it up and then look at it in a comprehensive way. But there's not a label for that.
Right.
And what happens because they have labels and they're great at naming things, those labels have crept into the church. And I
Yep.
hear it all the time. I got
Yep.
PTSD. When someone says that to me, it's fine. I acknowledge it. Okay, you got PTSD, but then okay, so what are we talking about? And so
Right.
I want them to get into the minutia of their exact experience, and then I can begin to address it from a biblical perspective. But we're working at a tremendous disadvantage because we can't neatly package our things with these nice acronyms. All right, so this book has been published going on a year and a half. What has the aftermath been? I would imagine with any book like this that they would be positive and negative. And so what have you been doing for the past 14 months?
Yeah. It's quite honestly gotten so busy in a good way, that I just, prayerfully know that I need to continue equipping other people. And thankfully, other counselors are starting to speak more and write on this and be trained and realize that, hey, we can, these are things that we can talk about and really help people. And they're seeing fruit. And that's been an encouragement as well. But one of the highlights for me, there's a couple highlights, but actually this morning, so I'm counseling 5 different people. One of them is a lady, and so she's not coming to this, but 4 of the people, and then we have an additional young man that completely, diagnosed as bipolar. So there's no like qualification. It's just people from different churches, Christians from different churches that are either in the process and they've come to me and tapering or just desperate to get out of the mental health system. A lot of people don't realize this. I mean, I'm dealing with and helping a young man right now that no one would listen to him. And a lot of people think that these drugs are medicines that heal, and they're not healing mechanisms. And in one of the psychiatric clinics I work with here locally, he'll say that he says, hey, all we can do is treat symptoms, but I don't think we're even doing that well. And the point I'm making is they often cause the very phenomena that they're allegedly addressing. So if you research, for example, antidepressants, they are depressogenic for a lot of people because they blunt your feeling. They actually make you numb to life. They create the very depressive feeling and emptiness that they're allegedly treating. And again, I encourage anyone to research this. This isn't my thinking. I'm just delivering the facts to you. And so it's real joy for me to see someone's life radically changed and them to have life and regain an understanding, restore relationships, be able to taper. I'm working with another physician here that, in God's grace, you talk about God's sovereignty. About 6 years ago, he got one of my books, and he's 30 minutes from us here. And we started corresponding about this young man that came to me, one of the guys I'm counseling. And long story short, he's like, "Are you the Daniel Berger that wrote the mental illness series?" And I said, "I am." And he's like, he said, I just want you to know that my entire practice changed when I read that. And that was a joy for me. So I get to work with this guy, and it's been a joy. So we just started this morning our Bible study, and we're going through one of my books, Rethinking Depression, and just to see what God's doing and a reminder that that's a testimony of what God did in my own heart. I think sometimes people think you and I are stale, and by that I mean like we think we have life all together, and we struggle. We have weaknesses and we have wickedness, and why we need the atonement, why we need Christ. And I know you've shared quite a bit, and one of the reasons I love doing conferences with you. If anybody, wants us to Rick and I love being together and tag teaming off each other. In case anybody can't tell, but I appreciate your testimony. I appreciate you've shared your suffering and you've written from experiential, but that wisdom of Scripture, and that's the vital thing. And rethinking depression is a token of God's grace in my own life, being deeply hurt and having to work through. In my case, it was the fear of man and wanting to be approved and gain that approval of man, rather than fearing the Lord. And it was a snare that God dealt with. And so, yeah, it's been going back to your question. It's been a joy for the most part. There have been people that you still scratch your head and go, what, like, just go if this system's working for you, go.
I want to get into the negative aspect, but I want to touch on something that you just said. Just talk briefly about the aggressive and antagonistic nature of medication, because I don't think the general public understands that it's not healing something, it's actually attacking something.
Yeah, and I think it's important. I'm not speaking from a moralistic perspective. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. So like we let's not even discuss that today. The issue that you're asking is, what is the mechanism of drug action? I'm using an actual pharmaceutical term. And some people might be like, okay, you're completely out of bounds here. Your degree is not in pharmaceuticals. It's not, but my book, The Chemical Imbalance Delusion, is endorsed by 3 people that are very, very highly esteemed in the pharmaceutical world. 2 of them are professors or pharmaceutical engineers. Dr. Joe Cummins, as an example. Another one's a professor at University of Florida. Another one works for Merck. So everything's been peer reviewed, validated. This isn't just a fun theory. This is what they teach if you go study pharmaceuticals. So the mechanism of drug action is what the drug does to your body. And these are the vast, vast majority. In fact, I'm not aware of any, and I've studied it a lot, that are not antagonists, which means they destroy health in order to have their effect. And that's why more and more psychiatrists are speaking out. Now, I want to again reiterate, I believe that things like what they call antipsychotics, and that's a misnomer. It's really a major tranquilizer. That's what it's classified as. When people aren't sleeping, tranquilizing them helps them not just to get out of psychosis, but to regulate their sleep. And there's a really, really important place for those, if I can say it that way. But we have to find out, again, what the real cause is. We can't just be content to drug a person, because the statistics show it's devastating to that person just to drug them the rest of their life. And again, I'm just saying the facts out of truth. I'm not judging whatever a person listening decides to do. These are the facts, and more clinicians and psychiatrists are speaking out. If I can just reference quickly, Awais Aftab, who's another prominent psychiatrist, last Monday published an article in the New York Times. You can look it up. And he's not a what they call anti-psychiatrist. I love how they phrase people that don't agree with them. They have a category for that too. They're brilliant at categories, but he's actually an establishment guy. And he said, we've got to stop saying safe and effective, because there are millions of people suffering because of the drugs we're giving them, and we're pretending like they're liars. And they want to burn our entire system down. And if we don't, they're going to destroy us. And it's a really interesting thing that's happening. And sadly, it's often the Christians that are the last to go, oh, yeah, I want science. I want to listen to truth. And, they're stuck in their ways and don't realize what they've accepted.
Well, a part of that is that used to be that we weren't as cynical. Authority, we submitted to authority, respected authority, agreed with authority. But I think since 2020, with the pandemic,
Yeah.
much of the culture was absolutely broken at that point. And I'm saying that as a good thing, to
Right.
where we are looking at things another way.
Yeah.
And again, cynicism is not the best word. Actually, the word is discernment and wisdom and just human intelligence, that we're saying, well, maybe there are some other options here. We've been following Casey Means for the past year or so. She wrote a book called Good Energy. Was an esteemed doctor at Stanford University, and she walked away from her practice because she was just cutting on people. She had a specialty when she just cut on people. And one of the interesting things about doctors with specialties is that the smaller the body part is, the higher they go up and the more money they make, because they're specializing. And so she's focused on this one area of the body, and she began to think, this is a comprehensive problem, and I'm not looking at this holistically. And as she began to wrestle with these things, she just walked away from her practice,
Yeah.
wanting to understand root cause. That
Right.
what I'm doing is basically just amputating the problem, which is similar kind of what many of the medications do, but it's not dealing with root cause. And that's what her book, Good Energy, which is part of it's her testimony of how
Yeah.
she got to this place, and then talking about the mitochondria and where this our energy source, and getting down at a metabolic label now, or a metabolic cause. She just recently has been nominated as the Surgeon General, if that goes through,
Mm.
last week. And so it's been interesting to follow her journey, because she, along with many people that you're identifying here, are coming to that conclusion. They're
Right.
recognizing that whether it's the evolution of Freud to Kraepelin to on and on, or the evolution of the DSM from DSM-1 to DSM-5-TR,
Yeah.
these are just evolutions that aren't really following science. They're just
Right.
kind of, not totally, but kind of making things up because they really don't know what the cause is. And when these
Right.
people appreciate their integrity, I mean, to walk away from a six-figure income and
Right.
and go to zero because it's an integrity conscience issue, I do respect that.
So
All
do
right,
I.
all right, so there's been positive, from which is what I would expect from the book, but as you also say, that there's going to be blowback, and of course the Christian community would be part of that. So, what, if you want to delve into those waters just briefly, what has been the negative of your book,
Yeah.
negative reaction, and maybe some of the causes for that
Yeah. I,
blowback?
I, sadly people do, everybody has different motives for what they do. Right. So I got to be careful. I don't judge motives. Um, but I'd like to think in grace that there is, uh, people who think that they are doing what's right and are doing it out of love in their mind can do some horrific things. So you look at what happened in Nazi Germany, which again, ironically, is the Kreplinian model in the first place. There were two things that basically were sold to the German people: was this is what's best for humanity, empathy. Do you really care about saving humanity? I think this same tactic has been given with the global warming, whole economic selling point. Like, you don't care? You don't care about the universe we live in?
That's
Well,
called
yeah,
that's called gaslighting, actually.
yeah. Well, and it plays on this empathy idea, right? As
Right.
long as you're empathetic, and then the second thing is scientific. So if I'm doing science, and I put that in quotes, it's really scientism. And that video here posted by Nasir Gami, he actually says that we're not doing science. We're sitting around a table and we're deciding these are impairments and distresses that we judge to be. This is the eugenic model. It's saying you're unhealthy and you're healthy based on heuristic or social constructs. And he repeats that over and over again. This is not, okay, we just found cancer cells in a body. Let's call this cancer. And now we can start treating people and discovering in the body. They're not diagnosing, they're actually classifying. And that's a completely, they like to use the word nostalgia, but psychiatrists actually have a taxonomy, and many psychiatrists are beginning to use that. They have used that, but they're using it more and more. Taxonomy is classification. So flowers, for example, animals, you can classify different species. And what they're doing is just saying, okay, all human distress impairment that is persistent and a person can't get over, we're the authorities on creating classifications. And then when you come to us, we put you in the right category. And incidentally, he touches on the reliability and validity in that same video. And he confesses there is no reliability. One person, the one guy I mentioned that I'm counseling, that his current diagnosis is schizoaffective. So one of the things on my intake forms, I look at their different diagnoses. Well, he has 3 different diagnoses, to the point where he didn't even know what his current diagnosis was. I mean, that's I'm laughing, but this is common. Dr. Lieberman, in his book, Shrinks the Untold Story of Psychiatry, talks about receiving a patient that was diagnosed as schizophrenic and how this was a right judgment on the clinician's part. But as he began to work with him, he realized this guy had an alcohol problem rather than actually had. So there's a case in point of it's a failure to explain. A couple of psychiatrists say it's a placeholder. These are placeholders until we actually can help someone. So I don't know why people attack. I think it's varied, but thankfully it's very, very limited. The same people that write a nasty review, write a blog, it's the same very, very small group. And sadly, it's usually people that you're helping that don't assert themselves because, they've got a life, if I can say it that way. And I'm not criticizing. I'm just saying, I don't know why people get obsessed with me to try to, and they don't even address anything I'm saying. They're not saying, hey, all the science shows that sleep is not related. They're not saying that. And you start studying it, it actually shows, no, he's just showing us the science. So it's the classic, let's set up a straw man when it happens. And by God's grace, it's been limited. Now, this interview may cause more and more people to be upset, and that's fine. I just want to help people. So if you want help, that's why these books are there. But if your system is working, then continue in it. That's what my encouragement would be.
Well, one of the reasons that I texted you a few days ago is that I did the initial interview about this book, February 2024. One of our biblical counseling students, who's also a nurse, bought 2 of those books, and it was just life-changing, gave one away. And so I took that, he put something on one of our private forums, and I took a piece of a blurb of that out and I put it on my Facebook page. It says something like, I bought 2, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And he was very appreciative of what you did. Okay, so that's a string. It's been laying dormant for about a year. And then last week, something pops up where someone had commented on that string, and they said, Daniel Berger's book is misinformation. And well, I thought that was problematic in itself. And so
right,
when you make a global statement, Daniel Berger's book is misinformation. That reads
822 pages, right?
So, which, that's a gift if you can write that much misinformation. That's the creativity that it takes to
I'm not a genius. To come up with the truth that I'm just presenting, I would have to be a genius, and I'm not.
And then, so I investigated. I said, okay, he had a link there to another article that I read. And what I found interesting about the article is neither the gentleman who said it was misinformation has read the book, or the article that he led me to that critiqued your book.
Right.
They had not read it either.
Right.
And so here's 2 people speaking ex nihilo saying that this book is misinformation. So I asked him, I think kindly, if we're going to say something, basically your book is a lie, that we really do need to bring receipts. And he
Yep.
doesn't have any receipts, which is unfortunate. And then I tagged you on that, that you can
Yeah. Yeah.
respond to it. Now, I, I, I've been head down doing my own thing. I thought everything was fine until
Yeah. Me too.
about a week ago. So, what? Two questions: what is the misinformation or the alleged misinformation, and then two, follow up that may be a little more extensive. What new information have you um, read and
Yeah.
stumbled upon?
Um,
Since the writing of the book. So take part one first. I
yeah.
don't know what they're talking about here, and maybe you do.
Well, I did a interview, and when you have literally 1,000 citations, just short of 1,000 citations in your book, I mean, it's heavily supported, quoting
It
uh,
is that, yeah.
molecular psychiatry, New England Journal of Medicine, JAMA, et cetera. Like this isn't let me throw out an idea. It's very easy sometimes, especially with a name like Tory and Murray. They sound very similar. In the middle of actually back-to-back interview recordings, just to say the wrong name. And ironically, I said Eiffel or Tory in an interview. And instead of coming to me and say, "Hey, I know this guy and he didn't say that," I could have easily corrected and say, "Oh, I apologize. It was Murray. It was Robin Murray, Sir Robin Murray, who's the most esteemed guy when it comes to the schizophrenia construct," which I wish I had said. Like, I'm disappointed in myself, but it happens. We all forget things. So Sir Robin Murray just said now that we know there's no such thing as schizophrenia, we can actually start studying psychosis. That's exactly what I'm arguing, is that what we're calling psychosis is very real, but the moment we transubstantiate that real thing into this thing that doesn't exist, we're now chasing that. And so, I was citing that. Well, she made a big stink about it from an interview, didn't read the book. And again, I'm not going after her. I don't understand the motive. I don't under, and then there was somebody, I won't go into, let's just say that somebody claims that she wanted to meet with me. I would have never turned her down unless it was an attack. I would have asked, what's the purpose here? Anybody who's going to attack me, I'm not going to sit down and meet with. If they want to ask questions and genuinely want to understand where I'm coming from, and my heart to help people and to understand what God is doing, like this is an attack on the work of God and people, real life souls here. We're not talking about just a fun little theory that I'm not writing. Believe me, I'm not spending my life writing these books as a joyride. There's so much more I could be doing, and spending hours and hours counseling people and helping them. So it's a privilege to me to do this, but the fruit that God is bringing is exciting and it motivates me. And then, to be attacked in this way, it's not legitimate. And again, I, from what I understand, this particular person has a loved one diagnosed, and I sincerely want to help. But there may be some financial research and things behind it. I don't know, I don't know what the motive is, but yeah, I did read the article and it grieved me just because, I want to help anybody who wants help. Now, if you're just trying to prove a point, psychiatrists are coming to me and asking me questions. I don't think you're going to be the one to prove the point. And I don't mean that arrogantly, and I don't mean that to put another person down. If you don't like what I'm saying, just go the other way and it's fine. You've got your, but I think truth is difficult when you've accepted something. Especially this, it really bothers people that Kreplinianism is eugenic. It is what led to the Holocaust, and we have bought into it hook, line, and sinker here in the United States, and it's scary. And we're seeing it. We're seeing it peak its head. All we need is socialism again, and we're right back to this whole "you're dysfunctional." I just read an article in Neuroscience News that they believe that they've located where Christian faith, religious faith, I'm saying Christian, happens in the brain. And so they don't just think that bad things happen in the brain. They think that who we are entirely, they call biodeterminism, happens in the brain. It's the Bayesian theory of inference. And I just don't think people really get what's going on. This is an affront to the knowledge of God, and we're called to destroy that and to help. I think it's a lot of in the history of biblical counseling, in many cases, not in all, it's let me destroy this, but I have no alternative. And so what I really wanted to do before I wrote is, rather than knocking down these false teachings and these destructive, it's a history of destruction. Like nobody can look at the Kreplinian model even today and say, yes, it's been a success. It's not. And they are looking for an alternative and not understand how destructive this is. So that's my heart in this. And, I don't want to judge their motive, but yeah, if people are going to attack me, I'm not going to engage. If they want help, I've got time for that.
Yeah, typically there's a duality that's happening when you are attacked, is what they know to be true and then
Right.
what they're going through. So their experience, and that's very emotional. Whether
Yeah.
it's you going through something, or I have a child or a loved one going through something, that's traumatic enough. And then
Yeah.
this thing or whatever, I'm getting some kind of pragmatic help over here. And so those two things are working together. And then someone comes along and starts pecking away or deconstructing that. Rather than asking questions, we tend to attack. Now, just one other thing is that I do think that, I know that social media lends itself to that, because now
For sure.
everybody has a megaphone. And the truth is, everybody should not have a megaphone, because there is a decorum,
Right.
there is a protocol, there is a way of communicating on social media platforms. And unfortunately,
Yeah.
much of the communication that happens is more in attack mode. I get it
Yeah.
when the world does it, but when Christians are attacking
Yeah.
the Imago Dei, that is truly saddening to me. But
Yeah.
unfortunately, right here it is. I'm just a few seconds away
Yeah.
from saying anything about anybody, and that grieves me. There's a better way for us to communicate with
Yep.
one another,
Yeah.
especially when we disagree with each other.
Yep. Amen. Well, and it's unfortunate, and I want to be gracious and just think through. I'm sure whatever perspective is there is, I've not engaged with it. I don't know this woman, or any of these people, but it's not a personal thing. Like I'm writing to help people, and that would be what I would say. But in God's grace, my book was introduced to a whole new audience over the weekend. So I was excited to see how many books sold, and I pray that they help people. I know people are desperate
Where was
for
that?
answers.
Where was that?
Well, I make an assumption that the attempt to undermine the book
No,
without reading the book.
no. Where did you speak this weekend?
Oh, I didn't speak. That's what I'm saying. It's usually when I speak that books sell, but books are selling all the time, but usually during holidays, book sales go down, and they ramped up this week. And when the article came out, so I can only imagine a new audience must have been
Oh,
introduced.
okay.
So,
I got you. I
yeah,
got you.
yeah.
What was this was my birth. Is this what's the depressing week? This is my birthday. Were people depressed?
Did I say depressing week? It's
Was
It
there
was Mother's Day. It wasn't depressing.
holiday? I'm sorry. Okay.
Holiday. Yeah, yeah,
Holiday.
yeah.
I thought, well, if people buy your book, they're probably feeling bad and they won't help. And so I was thinking, no, this is my birthday week. Why would people be depressed? Sorry.
Well,
See, but this is how you problem solve. So I wasn't accusing you of anything. I was asking questions. I
Yes.
wanted clarifying questions. This is how we do it.
Amen. Yeah, and as you said, I think to start this book is a niche. It's not for everyone. This isn't an entertainment thing. This is if you and that's who I get when I counsel, is people are either just freshly received a diagnosis, or they've exhausted. I'm at some point I'll do a statistic on how how many years people have been in psychiatric system when they come to me, but usually people are just at their wits' end, suicidal, like desperate to find real answers. And I, of course, like getting at the front end because there's a high recovery rate for people who have psychotic breaks, and you find out what's actually causing it and resolve it. But once you get into that system, it can destroy the dopaminergic system, and your sleep is forever dysregulated. It's a really sad situation. So
Yeah, it seemed like PTSD was the on point as far as the acronyms and the DSM is concerned, but schizophrenia has really been charging hard over the past few years, which your book was very timely. I guess that was part of your motivation for writing it because
that's drugs, the alcohol and cannabis use increasing so dramatically. And again, that's just one cause of that. But when they legalize cannabis, we're seeing more and more homelessness, more and more hallucinations. I mean, they call it cannabis-induced psychosis, but they also just label people as schizophrenic, and there's tons of literature on that. So there is a correlate there as to why those have gone up.
Right, and PTSD would come out of the wars back in the 90s and
Right.
The early aughts, and so there was a lot of talk about that. So quick definition of psychosis for our viewers.
Yeah, it's and just so you know, there's different states, but I'll just give the two kind of main figures. Some people include catatonia, which is just a blank kind of paralysis, if you would, staring straight ahead. But the traditional quote unquote symptoms or criteria are delusions, which are false by definition, false fixed beliefs, despite clear evidence. So someone who they believe they're Napoleon, they will not let go of that. Many times these beliefs are religious, which is interesting. They have religious content, but they always reflect a person's lived experience, their heart, their history, etc. And then hallucinations is the other key aspect, and it's defined as a false sensory perception. So it could be feeling. I just was counseling earlier a woman who had postpartum psychosis, and she felt like snakes were crawling on her, and almost got put in the psych ward. There's visual hallucinations, auditory, etc. And so you hear voices, you see things, and that comes from not sleeping. Severe sleep disruption, outright insomnia, or really bad sleep problems. There's over 70 of those. So,
what's new information that's come out since the writing of your book?
Well, more and more psychiatrists are speaking out on we've got to get rid of the whole schizophrenia construct. I've sent my book to a couple of psychiatrists, and some of them have not read it, as you can imagine. I think some might be intimidated by they're busy, but some have. And more and more are saying we've got to get rid of these constructs and actually start treating the very reason people come. So psychosis, for example, not transubstantiate essentially what they do is create a different narrative. You say, I'm depressed because all these things happen in my life. And I say, you have major depressive disorder. Let's fix that in your body. We're not dealing with why you went in the first place. So what is new is more and more coming out and denouncing it. There's also a huge shift, and I discussed this in Saving Abnormal, but also in the Schizophrenic Unicorn. There's a huge shift to the autoimmune system as a theory. So now the brain and the genes and the gut as well is another theory of causes for these. For those that are still trying to figure this out, I mean, they're going to jump from chemicals to, constantly looking for a new cause to look for. And so when you don't sleep, your immune system shuts down. The average person within 5 days will die from their immune system going into shock and shutting down. So clearly, immune problems are going to happen when you're not sleeping, and they confound those things many times. But it's been a really encouraging season. Of course, I don't like getting attacked for no reason when I'm trying to help, but I signed up for this, and it's been a huge blessing. It's been a lifelong dream, but then to see people's lives radically changed and restored has been worth all the attacks and everything else. So I'll keep doing that.
Yeah, it's no fun. I don't particularly struggle with it. I tell people if I don't get cursed out twice a week, there's something wrong.
I can't imagine anyone being mad at you, Rick.
I know, I know, but it does happen. But I I just tend to I think about them and it's like it's sad. I wonder sometimes like, what is their story? What's going on with them? What would cause them to react this way? I mean, what they're doing if they say something negative to me, that's just the front end of it. But as I look or as I speculate, I can't imagine, what their life is like. I mean,
Yeah, that's
somebody
sad.
just said the other day I was a nutcase. And I think sometimes it's like, why would you even write that? Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
so there's something wrong with me to communicate that way on a social media platform. So it makes me sad, not for me, because honestly, I don't care. I got things to do. I don't care. I do have people that
Yeah.
speak into my life. I have people who aren't impressed with me and they love me. And that's exactly what you want. They're not impressed with you, but they love you. Maybe a third element, they have the courage to say something. And I have those people in my life. And so I'm good when these people over here who aren't impressed with me and say some of the most unkind things. It doesn't really bother me at all, other than making me sad for them. But that is the nature of the business. I mean, that's
Yeah.
how it goes. And so I have to ask myself, do I want to help people? And the answer to that question, I mean, that's non-negotiable. And so I have to keep pushing myself out there. But I know
Mhm.
that there would be blowback. But they're struggling. They have their stories, and so I think
Yep.
my main reaction is I have pity for them. If we can go back to the beginning, you mentioned reification. That's kind of starting back where we started.
Yeah.
But if someone tagged that word, I'd love for you to define it.
Yeah. So I mentioned transubstantiation and reification kind of as a similar, synonymous, but um, if I take an idea and I that's inorganic, it's an abstract idea, and I try to make it real in the real world, in nature, something in nature, or insist that it exists in nature and it yet has not been found, I'm reifying that thing, that idea. And so going back to schizophrenia, numerous psychiatrists admit that they have reified the construct. In other words, I just lovingly say, and there's hardly any, which I'm thankful for, but there's hardly any physicians. Initially, they're kind of like, but I get invited, for example, our local psychiatrist is sending me people because they're seeing such success that what God's doing. And he asked me, he's like, I don't want to like dump everybody, but like we don't have answers and we want help. What are you doing? And so reifying is taking that idea and saying, this is your problem. It's real. And first time we met, I asked him, I said, does schizophrenia exist organically? And his answer was yes. And I said, can you show me a real picture of schizophrenia or show it to me on a petri dish or, in a lab? Like what are you actually studying? Oh no, we're studying the phenomena that we're calling schizophrenia. And I said, okay, well that's not the same thing. That's a reification. So I'm asking, and by the way, the burden does rest on people that say schizophrenia exists organically. I'm saying, ironically, that this is kind of humorous. I'm saying that there are real biological diseases that are causing psychosis, and they're getting mad at me for saying that. Think about that a second. And they're saying, no, 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 these invisible things are what matter. It's just like Freud said, the id and the ego and your lust for your mother, that's what's causing your schizophrenia. That's literally, this, and I'm, watering down and simplifying Freudianism, but it's no different that we invent a whole new scheme that's invisible, that's inorganic, and denying real science to say, oh, and it takes work to find the real cause to this. And that's why it's so easy to say, well, we don't know what it is. You have schizophrenia. I mean, it's a simplistic, easy out the door. Here's your drug. And Gammy touches on this with ADHD, the same thing. He's like, hey, you guys are going to hate me for this, but PTSD, like narcissistic personality, ADHD, they don't exist. They're not real things. I mean, he says this in this interview, and I keep going back to that, but last night I was just wired, had to go write a little bit because I didn't get my sleep. I violated my own principles, but it's good, and so reification is an error. It's an error that takes something that is an idea and it insists that it exists organically without any organic thing existing in nature.
Yeah, I think, our messaging can be better because if we lead with it doesn't exist, we're picking a fight
Yeah.
unwittingly.
Yeah.
I've been in conferences with you. I just talk about suffering, and so my part's the easy part, but you're challenging faith constructs. As I said
Right.
earlier, this is a religion, it is a faith, and
Right.
there's a feeling of being attacked because this is what I believe in. And they do have anecdotal evidence, whatever that means. I mean, there's a result, there's a
Right.
positive result. And again, I put that in air quotes, but
Right.
it may be legit, it may be not, but they've had some kind of experience with it. And this is all they know is what's in this framework. And it feels like it's
Right.
being attacked. And I've said many times, it's like, I'm glad you do what you do. I don't want to do what you do.
Well, I'll give you a case.
I get attacked for Christ and, all of that. And that has happened for 2,000 years. You do too, but you also have this almost unique niche. I mean, there's other people that teach similarly, but you're within this unique niche here
Yeah.
that is very emotional. And so, as I
Well, if it wasn't for
addressed
Christ, I wouldn't be doing it.
yeah, as I address the log in my eye, the thing that I ask is how can my messaging be better? I asked a lady, this was 20 years ago in counseling, and I'll just give you the short story, but I asked her, why are you on medication? It was an inquisitive question. I'm just curious. What are the meds for? Why are you on medication? And she just went off on me. She started yelling. She started screaming. Now, once she calmed down, I asked her, what was that about? I mean, I'm trying to understand your story. Part of your story, you said, is medication. I'm asking this question, but what she was hearing is that I'm going to take her medication away. And so she
Right.
told me what her motive is. You can't always know why a person reacts the way that they do. We don't know their motivation, but she actually told me. I said, "Oh no, I'm not interested in your medication. I'm collecting data here. That's all
Right.
I'm doing." And so once she calmed down, and thankfully God did a wonderful work in her life, and she was off medication on her own. I had
Right.
nothing to do with that other than offering biblical counseling. But
Yeah.
again, she felt attacked. And so ever since that moment 20 something years ago, I always think about in this area that you're in, my messaging, how can I best communicate this? Because I know no matter what you say, they're going to hear it a certain way. And so I try to
Right.
be as careful as I can.
That's good. That's good. Yeah. Going back to reification, I just want to add that you'll read a lot of research. So, for example, gray matter, or white matter, or atrophied brains, or enlarged ventricles, or the dopaminergic system, like all these different things that are quote unquote correlated to schizophrenia. They're actually correlated to psychosis. And I would argue that they better correlate to severe sleep problems. It's exactly what the brain looks like and how the brain responds when you're not getting sleep. So here's a case in point where real evidence, just like psychosis is real evidence is fit into this prefabricated worldview, this construct, this heuristic construct, rather than let me just consider that we already know that sleep is causing. And one of the things the DSM-5 text revised says is that if there's known sleep problems, that actually goes above all other diagnoses. And that's a really, really profound statement, and it's regularly ignored. And that's to the point of how important our sleep is. It's something that God mentions in Genesis 1, and rest, that we follow those creation mandates. He's not just made us to function spiritually in relationship with him, certainly, but physically we're designed to function a certain way. And I think that's part of our culture. You've done interviews and touched on this, where I don't like my body. I don't like the way it's created, my physical nature, so I can do whatever I want with it. And God wants to be the Lord over it's our reasonable form of service, as Romans 12 says, to present our bodies as a living sacrifice. Whatever my hand finds to do, whether I eat or drink or whatever I do, I can do all to the glory of God. And it, of course, has to happen in a relationship with God. But these things matter, and we quickly brush them aside. And the only true, seculars love this phrase, but the only true biopsychosocial model is the Word of God. They try to get away from bioreductionism, and you'll hear that in Gammy's video as well. He says, I'm not a bioreductionist. But you start reading all the social or relational things and all the quote unquote psychological or spiritual, they ultimately reduce to brain function. So they call it soft materialist or soft naturalism, like all these new terms, and it is a denial of how God created us. And that's my plea this is for Christ. We've got to get back to the gospel. It is not just fun and nice for some of life. It's for all of our life. It's a joy. And that's my burden, to help people in that way and glorify our God.
All right. Thank you. We're going to wrap up.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Have you written a book since the Schizophrenic Unicorn?
I have. We'll have to do an interview on that. It's the Discipling of Fool's Heart.
Okay. And you're doing a Cliff's Note of Schizophrenic Unicorn, you said?
Yes. Yep. And that should be out I think in the fall. It's done. It's being edited.
And is there something else you're working on now?
I'm working on.
I'm sorry, I asked that question wrongly. What are you working on now?
Yeah. Do you know who you're talking to?
Yeah.
I've got 4 books in the works right now: The Philosophy of Mental Illness, Christian Perspective, and then the second edition of Teaching a Child to Pay Attention will come out here probably in the fall as well. A textbook that I wrote a chapter for quite a while ago, working on creation mandates, as well as another book on trauma, just a theology of trauma.
This is Dr. Daniel Berger. You can find his books on Amazon, and it'll either take you down a golf path, Daniel Berger, the golfer. But
maybe I should have chosen that career.
Yeah. But look for Daniel Berger. You can type Daniel Berger and mental illness, and that will get you to his full library on Amazon. You can also get them at his website as well. What is your website? Give them the Aletheia.
DrDanielBerger.com.
Oh, you're not. Oh, okay. It's DrDanielBerger.com.
Yep.
And what's Aletheia Ministries?
Aletheia International Ministries, or AIM, is both the ministry, the LLC, but also the publishing house. And then I have AIM Truthcast on YouTube. You can follow those videos where I'm teaching a biblical phenomenology and some of these same concepts, but more in depth.
And I'll put all those links in the show notes. Daniel, thanks so much.
Thank you, Rick.
Thanks for joining us. Learn more and get access to other resources at lifeovercoffee.com.